Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Sequoyah Fund Live. I am your host, Russ Siegel, Executive Director of the Sequoyah Fund. With me today is a special guest. I've been looking forward to talking to him for a long time. We don't get to catch up as often as we used to, but I want to invite him on in today. Welcome, Shawn Spruce, or shall we say, Dr. Per Cap. How you doing, Shawn?
Russ, I'm doing fantastic. It's so wonderful to be here. I love being involved, working with you again at Sequoyah Fund. It's been a few years, but it's great to be back.
Yeah. Looks like Halloween at your house.
It is. We're ready to go. We've got the pumpkins carved. We've got the cobwebs on the front door. So we're excited. We're going to kind of pre-package our candy this year. We're not going to create a slide or a special candy shoot like I read about online. Some people are creating really fancy devices to deliver candy in a social media type of context, but we do have things pre-packaged, and we're going to have a bowl, and we're going to hand it out so we don't have to bring anybody in the house or anything like that. So I think it's going to work.
Cool. So you're not going to shoot candy at kids with a slingshot or a potato gun or anything like that?
No. I was thinking that might work, but
well, I've got to ask, what are you? I know you have a young child, so what are you going to go as for Halloween this year?
So my daughter, she's going to be 7 years old in January, Celeste, and she is going to be dressed like a wolf. She's got a wolf costume. That's what she wanted to be this year. I'm going to wear the same costume I've worn for the last 4 years. I went to the Halloween Superstore a few years ago and got the cheapest costume they had in the store. It's a Crayola crayon, and it's basically just a purple T-shirt that has Crayola type bordering on the sleeves and around the collar. It says Crayola across the top, and there's a little pointed purple hat that matches it like a crayon tip, but I go as the Crayola crayon, and I haven't got any complaints yet. So as long as I can keep wearing it, I'm going to wear it.
Very cool. Yeah. Get all you can out of that. I've got an old chef's coat. I think this year I'm going to go as a curmudgeon. I've got enough gray in my beard now. I think that what I'll do is I'll just sit on the front porch and get off my lawn.
I'll tell you about it, man. The other day I had to pluck some hair out of my ear. It's so official.
People don't tell you that. People don't tell you that as you get older. And I keep trying to tell my nephew, I cut my nephew's hair. My grandfather was a barber, so it's in my DNA, I guess, and I'm cheap. So I cut their hair, but I'm like, guys, at some point we're going to have to start trimming your ears. And they're like, what? They're teenagers. They don't know. It's going to happen.
I thought about writing like a little book or something, just profiling like everything that kind of happens as you get older, because I'm now in my 50s. And I remember exactly what you said. Nobody tells you. Like, I remember being younger and people would say, well, when you get older, I'm just worried about what you're thinking right now, because when you get older, and I would always say, well, when I get older, like, what's going to change? How am I going to look at things differently? They never tell you. No, they just you just learn for yourself. And it seems like it would be so much easier if people kind of had a heads up as to what's to come. The lower back pain, when you first need those reading glasses, all these little things. And it's just one little thing after the other. And eventually one day you wake up and you're like, okay, I'm advanced age.
Yeah. The chances of dying while getting out of the bathtub go up exponentially as you get older. I mean, people don't tell you these things. Please write that book.
Okay.
The world needs you, Shawn.
Okay. Well, that'll be my sideline to money management.
Yeah, there you go. Little side hustle. Little side hustle income. So for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your background, and how you came to be known as Dr. Per Cap.
Absolutely. So I'm originally from New Mexico. I'm a member of the Laguna Pueblo there in New Mexico. And about 13, 14 years ago or so, I got involved doing personal finance consulting work, doing training, presentations, writing curriculum, things like that. And it was always a passion of mine, personal finance. It was more of a hobby. And I would have friends and relatives. Somebody might need help with their taxes, or somebody would get in a car accident and they would need help negotiating with an insurance company. And they would call me and I'd help them in any way I could. And I'd go to bat for them if that's what they needed. If they needed somebody to help them with their taxes, I'd do that. I had a cousin one time, she'd retired from a job and she wanted to roll over a 401k. I helped her do that. I'd do whatever I could. And if there was information I didn't know about or understand, I would just educate myself. And this was around the time when the internet started really taking off, and there were all kinds of resources available to understand more about managing money and personal finance. So it grew from there, and I got affiliated with some different organizations in Indian country that were looking for people like me that could go out and deliver trainings and workshops and really spread this message of financial empowerment. And it grew from there. And I first came to Cherokee in August of 2008. So it was almost 12 years, just a little over 12 years ago, the very first time I'd come to Cherokee, and it was doing some consulting work, teaching money management. And holy cow, I just really enjoyed working there in Cherokee, and started working more projects and started getting pretty well connected in the community. Ended up falling in love with a woman from Snowbird, and we've now been together about 10 years, and we have a daughter, of course, and ended up moving here to North Carolina. And for a few years, we lived in Cherokee. We had an apartment. And then about 4 years ago, we bought a house here in Asheville. So now I'm officially a resident of the Bohemian Asheville community, which is kind of good and bad. But anyway, I enjoy living here, and really happy and excited to be back working with Sequoyah Fund.
Well, we're glad to have you back. I know that you did some work with us with youth financial literacy training and so forth years ago, and the building native communities training was huge here, and we appreciate your work with that. But we have a little different focus these days. Well, I'm going to jump back to something here. The Dr. Per Cap thing. You write our Dr. Per Cap articles. A lot of people may not know this, but when they see these Dr. Per Cap, the Ask Dr. Per Cap articles in the One Feather, when they see them on our Facebook page, you're Dr. Per Cap, right?
I am. I'm officially Dr. Per Cap. Yeah, I got to let that goatee grow in a little bit more.
Do you still have the stethoscope? Yeah.
Still have the stethoscope with a dollar sign on it. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
So I started Dr. Per Cap, I think it was about 8 years ago or so. And it was, there's so many people out there doing financial advice columns, right? You got the big superstars like Dave Ramsey, and then you've got the kind of smaller profile people that write in local papers and things like that. And I thought there was really a need to address some of these personal finance issues from a Native American perspective. We have some unique issues in handling money here in Indian country. Of course, per cap is an issue with many tribes, but you also have, unique issues with regard to assets held in trust, taxation issues, things like sovereign immunity, where, how does a car dealer repossess a car on a reservation, things like that. So I really wanted to touch on some of those topics. And I started writing Dr. Per Cap, and it's just grown. It's of course, it's published there by Sequoyah Fund website. I know sometimes the articles are in the One Feather, but it goes out nationwide, and there's a lot of tribes that run those articles in their newsletters, tribal newspapers, websites, and things like that. So it's gotten a really good following. I'm really, really proud of the whole project.
So could we now refer to you as a syndicated columnist?
I think you kind of can. Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
Okay. All right. We'll add that title there as well. Financial guru / syndicated columnist.
I'll tell you what, I'm giving Dear Abby a run for her perpetually eternal syndicated following.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, well, some of those pieces of advice don't become irrelevant just because the author has died. So your advice could live in perpetuity.
It could.
That's part of the beauty of making art too, is that it just lives on long after you're gone. So something to look forward to. We'll always have Dr. Per Cap with us.
Don't sound so doom and gloom.
Oh, no. Listen, there's plenty of doom and gloom out there to go around. Plenty of doom and gloom.
You got a lot of good years left here.
Yes. Unless you die getting out of the bathtub. Right?
Oh my gosh.
Because you're trying to trim your nose, your ear hair. So listen, speaking of doom and gloom, one of the reasons we brought you back, because we trust you. We trust your advice. We trust your counsel. And we know that you put a lot of thought into what goes into those Dr. Per Cap articles and the advice that you give people. So when we started looking at the effects of COVID and the effects of businesses closing down, businesses going out of business, people being laid off, the casinos being closed, a lot of things happening. It was almost like this perfect storm. And we started to think, how many people were prepared for this? I will admit that I wasn't. I don't think this was ever on my radar of things that could possibly happen. And now that we're 7 months into it, we look around and we see people who are still not really fully embracing what they need to do to get through this. And so, we wanted to kind of turn away from the doom and gloom and see what we could do to help people get better prepared for the next COVID, because there will be a next something, whether it's a job loss, a business that goes under and you lose your job, or a sickness that's not related to COVID, maybe an accident. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, I think I'll wrap my car around an oak tree today on the way to work, but there it happens. But one of the things that we were looking at, Shawn, is that we understood that per cap was going to be down a little bit this year. And it started us thinking about this whole concept of income disruption. So help us understand what all is wrapped up in that term of income disruption.
Right. So income disruption, anytime we suffer some kind of a severe financial shock that impacts how much money we have coming in every month, whether it's getting laid off from a job, whether losing hours at work, or if we have maybe a small business and we suddenly hit a roadblock and we just lose a lot of sales, or perhaps if we have per capita income and that per capita income decreases due to something like COVID-19, where, casinos all over the United States, all over Indian country, were closed for a period of time. Many have reopened, but they're only now open, serving a limited number of customers. And so they're making less money. And as we all know, per cap is based on a percentage of that annual casino revenue that's paid out to tribal members. So if that casino takes a hit, if they earn less money, if less customers are coming in, less people are playing those machines, it's going to have a direct impact on per cap. And I think that's really been kind of the elephant in the room in and around Cherokee for the last few months. I think there's been a lot of rumors that per cap is going to be less than it was previously, than it was last year. Was a really strong year for per cap. So the concern is, how much less, and what's the bottom line impact going to be to people's per cap payments?
So we did get some good news this morning. It was made official that, and of course, I'm going to put this up on the screen because last year, the December 2019 per cap was 7214. I think that was the pre-tax number. So obviously, in a normal time, under normal circumstances, we would want that to go higher. But like you said, until today, we just didn't have any clue what that number was going to be. And I think people were thinking that, it's maybe not going to be so bad. And a lot of people were thinking maybe it's going to be worse than it is. So we actually got the number. And before taxes, that number is $48.99. So it is down. But not devastatingly so, I think. I think this is actually some good news. If you have your taxes taken out of that amount, you're gonna see $41.65 in your payout. So I think this is good news, but that's still a pretty big gap of close to $3,100. What do people do when they were kind of relying on that money, Shawn?
Yeah, it's it's going to be a drop. And the other thing we have to remember too is that's December per cap, but how is this all going to impact per cap in June? This coming June 2021, next December? This could be a long-term type of reduction. So I always tell people the first thing you need to do whenever you're dealing with some kind of a financial shock or income disruption is just take a good inventory of your financial situation. And first step is to get organized. So really sit down and get those pay stubs together, figure out how much money you have coming in every month, whether it's from wages from a job, whether it's a salaried position, whether you've got some kind of side hustle, whether you're self-employed. Figure out how much money you have consistently coming in every month, and then figure out what those expenses are. Figure out how much you're paying every month. If you don't already have that information organized, get it figured out. A lot of people have a pretty good idea of how much they're spending. I spend this much on rent, or I spend this much on my housing payment, my car payments this month. But they don't necessarily know how much they're spending on groceries, or how much gas they're spending, or how much disposable income they're spending, just to keep their household maintained. And I find usually people underestimate how much they're spending. And when they sit down and really track and figure out exactly what those expenses are, then they're usually pretty surprised that they're actually spending more than they had originally thought they were. So that's the first step, just figuring out what your situation is. Hopefully, you're spending less than you're making, which means you're going to have what we call positive cash flow. It means you've got money left over every month. That's what we want to all strive for. If you have negative cash flow, it means your expenses are more than your income. And that's a situation where we need to take action pretty quickly. Either figure out some way to increase our income, which is going to be tough to do right now, right? Because so many businesses are still closed, or they're not, they're struggling with less capacity, less customers than they had before. A lot of employers have laid people off. So it's going to be pretty tough to get that extra income. And especially now that we know per cap's going to be down as well, if people were counting on that extra per cap income in December. So for most people, I think the quickest and easiest way to get right side up, if we're not already there in regards to positive cash flow, is to cut those expenses, trim those expenses. And first thing we want to look at are those food costs. We want to look at some of those communication costs, Netflix. That stuff really, really adds up over time. Right now it's tough to eat out, but there's a lot of restaurants that are still open for delivery and carry out, and things like that can really eat into a budget. So look at those things, those flexible expenses that can easily or most readily be adjusted. Things like your rent, things like a mortgage payment, those are pretty much fixed expenses, but those flexible expenses, that's where we can start.
I got off of sodas a couple of years ago. I was stopping every day, putting a buck in the machine, get a Mountain Dew. Not only did it hurt my waistline, I didn't realize, it's only $1 a day, right? It's only $1 a day. But then if I didn't have cash, I'd slide that card. Well, that card is not $1. That card was like $1.25 or $1.35 or so for the same Mountain Dew. And when I stopped and took your advice and took a look at just what that was costing, it was incredible how fast the little things add up. And like I said, the car, the house, what those expenses are, but it's the other things that tend to get away from us. So in all of this preparation, I think you've got a little slideshow you wanted to kind of walk us through. And
yeah, Russ, and that's a good precursor for this. So let's go ahead, and I've got some questions I want to share, and let's go ahead and take a look at those
Okay.
images. Okay, so let's all get our thinking caps on here. I've got a few quiz questions we're going to go through. So go ahead and let's take a look at the next slide. And Russ, this chimes in with what you just said here. Paying with cash hurts more than plastic. Would that be true or false?
In terms of hurting me, I think it hurts me more to pay with cash simply because I see it go away.
Absolutely. Yeah, they've done some interesting studies on this. And when a person pays with cash, they internalize it more than if they swipe a debit card or insert it into a chip reader, or they make a purchase online. And it's because it's that tangible aspect of actually paying with money, as opposed to using a credit card or a debit card or using a PayPal account. So one thing I always encourage people, when possible, pay with cash, because you're going to be more mindful of those purchases.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's crazy. We think of money and we think of the classic image of money, a dollar bill or a silver dollar or something like that. For most of us now, our money's here. It's on that phone.
Yep.
It's an online bank statement. It's a mobile banking app. It's a PDF. We're not really dealing with cash. And I think that's one of the reasons why, as a country, many of us struggle financially more than in years past, is because we've become somewhat disassociated with our money, because everything's so electronic now. And electronics are great. I think it's wonderful that we have all these tools to manage money, but they do present challenges as well. Let's look at another one of these questions. How many advertisements is the average American exposed to every day? So think about this. When you drive in your car, if you're listening to the radio, you hear commercial jingles. If you see billboards along the side of the road, if you're like me and you watched Dancing with the Stars on Monday night. How many commercials do you see in the course of 1 hour of primetime television? Or, of course, when we're on our phones, when we're on our tablets, all the pop-up advertisements and different commercial messages. How many ads do you think we're exposed to every day?
Gosh, the last two just seem so high. I'm going to go with 500.
Believe it or not, they estimate 3,000
What?
advertisements. It's crazy. Some way,
Wow.
shape, or form. And what's every one of these ads telling us to do?
Buy.
Spend,
Yeah,
buy,
buy them.
consume. Right? We live in this consumer-driven society, and that's one of the reasons why, as a nation, we're struggling so much with this whole COVID-19 pandemic with regards to the economy, because 2/3 of our economy, right, is consumer spending, and that's you, me, and everybody else going out to eat, putting gas in our cars, going to the movies, buying things on Amazon, going shopping at Walmart. It's not corporate spending, not big business. It's not government spending. It's the American consumer. So we're driving this whole train. And when we have a setback like what we have now, it hurts, and it hurts everybody.
Wow. And what it tells me is that advertising works, and maybe we should be more careful about what we're susceptible to.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And it's become so insidious now. Like, do you remember? And so, I mean, now it's even hard to determine like what's a commercial and what isn't, because you go now, you watch a television show, you see a movie, and there's always that bottle of Coca-Cola right there in the middle of the scene, or they're eating a certain kind of chips, or they're staying in a certain brand name hotel. This product placement advertising, that's all part of an advertising. That's just not coincidence that in a movie they're eating a bag of Doritos on camera. I mean, that's companies pay big money to have their products positioned like that. So we're getting it from all angles.
Wow, you mean companies pay? Listen, you keep talking. I'm going to go grab a bag of Doritos and sit here with. We'll do some product placement. How's that? All right. What's next here?
Okay. This is a fun question here. How many tribes currently pay per capita to members from gaming revenues? How many tribes? So first off, I'm going to give you all a hint. There's approximately 576 federally recognized tribes in the United States. 576. Okay. And I will tell you that the answer to this is 126. And this date is a few years old. This is as of about 2015. But in 2015, we had 240 gaming tribes. So even though there's over 570 federally recognized tribes, only about 240 are actually gaming tribes. And managing over 400 casinos spread out across 29 states. But of those 240 gaming tribes, only 126 are making annual per capita distributions from gaming revenues to tribal members. So I think that's interesting, because there's kind of a stereotype nowadays that all these tribal nations are paying per cap, and every tribe has this big casino and they're just raking the dough. And that's just not true. And it really underscores how enormously successful the Eastern Band has been over the last couple of decades, that not only are they one of these gaming tribes that's able to pay per capita, but the fact that they've been able to pay per capita distributions so steadily and throughout the course of the per capita history, which goes back over 20 years, with the exception of the setback that we had during that last big financial crisis back in 2008, 2009, the mortgage meltdown, EBCI per cap has steadily increased for the most part every year, which leads us to our next slide. For 2019, EBCI members received a record-setting per cap of, how much was it?
Well, see, I know this number because you you gave it to us in the video that we've been running on our social media.
That's right.
So tell us.
$13,523.
Ha!
Record per cap. That was a nice little score. And unfortunately for 2020, EBCI members are not going to have a record per cap. That's official now. Russ shared the information just a few minutes ago. So, but it could have been so much worse. I mean, there was talk that per cap payment might be half of what it was last year for December payment, or maybe even less than half. So, yeah, it is what it is.
Well, and I think it's an opportunity now to thank those who've made this possible. The folks at the casino have worked tirelessly to make it a safe place for people to go and enjoy their time, and be entertained. And so everybody who's been involved in making this happen, I think deserves some applause. Yes, it is down, but you're right, Shawn. It could have been so much worse. And of course, we're still looking at that. That's not, like I said earlier, that's not the only kind of income disruption people are facing. We are still dealing with a lot of businesses that are right there on the edge,
Right. Right. Yeah. So I know there's a lot of local businesses that have closed or still closed. So if you've been laid off, if you've had hours cut, if you've been furloughed, or even if you've been sick or you've been caring for a family member that's been sick, that's going to create income disruption too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So definitely these are unprecedented times, and we definitely need to prepare. So that first step is to take an inventory and figure out where you're at, how much money you have coming in. Now we know what per cap's going to be for December, so you can account for that. Make sure to include that per cap income in addition to whatever type of income you have from wages or salary. And you've got a pretty good idea of how much money you're going to have to get you through the end of the year. And the next step, of course, is just to start looking at those expenses and figure out where we can trim costs.
We'll go back to your slides in just a second, but I want you to talk a little bit more about something here. When we talk about tracking those expenses, what is the best way for people to really get a handle on those?
Yeah, well, definitely different strokes for different folks. I mean, some people are still old school, and I recommend for some people, it's easiest just to get a notebook, just a simple notebook, and write down what those expenses are every week. Every day when you fill up with gas or you go to the grocery store, keep a log of those expenses. And at the end of the week, total them up. And then at the end of the month, total those 4 weeks up. And you'll have a good record of what those expenses are. That works for some people. Other folks, there are a ton of free apps that you can download on your phone. And there's one I use called Personal Finance. It's a free app. It works great on Androids. You can use it on an iPhone as well. And it'll just automatically, every time you go to a store, you can automatically pop it up and you can just input what those amounts are. And that'll do a really good job of tracking your expenses. If you use your mobile banking app, if you've got a bank account at a local bank or even one of the large national banks, they all have a lot of really good mobile banking features, and they'll do income tracking or expense tracking for you as well. There's just a lot of tools out there. Some people like to use a spreadsheet on a laptop or a tablet. That can work as well. So I really recommend people use whatever tool they're most comfortable with. If you want to use an app on your phone, if you want to use your mobile banking app from your bank account, or if you want to just write things by hand, whatever works for you, just as long as you do it. And I even do this myself every so often just to kind of see where I'm at financially. I'll just make it a point to track my expenses for about a month and just kind of see where my money's going, because as we grow and we change, as our family situations change, and we got really big into eating out really got big into eating at home a few years ago after our daughter was born, and so we don't eat out as much, but we sure do spend a lot of money at grocery stores. So it's
yeah. So there you have it. The best tool is the one you're actually going to use. Having fancy gadgets and apps, if you use them, they're great. If you're not going to use them, it's as good as not having them at all. And so, yeah, just a notebook, folks. Do whatever works. Let's go back in here to some of your slides. I know you got a few more for us. Let me pull this up. Okay, so this is something, when I do my workshops, I invariably have a participant or two that comes to me and just says, it's just really hard. And even though you present all this information and I know there's all these resources out there, I can read about personal finance online, but I really struggle managing my money. For some reason, I've got a decent job, but I just always seem to be behind in my bills. So I'm going to explain why that is, because it's tough to manage money. And really, why is that? What's really going on? And I think of our personal finance evolution as really involving 3 main steps. Okay. And these steps get a little bit more challenging as we go along. So the first step is just understanding basic information and skills. Okay. Like, a person can educate themselves or go to a workshop or read up online, and they can pretty quickly understand what a credit report is, what a credit score is, what a good credit score looks like,
what a bad credit score looks like. They could understand how interest rates impact loans. They could understand basics of investing or understand kind of the basics of how their 401k is set up. Just understanding the information and the relative skills that go with that. That's a pretty easy thing to accomplish in the grand scheme of things. Now, the next step, though, is can you take that information and can you actually apply it? Okay, like, sure, I might know what a good loan looks like or a bad loan looks like in terms of an interest rate and a term. But now can I actually go out and apply for a loan, and can I choose the right loan? Or can I negotiate a car purchase with a car salesperson that is very experienced and really knows how to kind of work me and use persuasion tactics and get me to spend more money than I probably ordinarily had planned on it. I've got a bank account. I can open that bank account, but now can I really manage it? Can I keep it from being overdrawn? Can I manage those tools, those products effectively? And that takes a little bit more challenge because now it's not monopoly money anymore. Now we're actually really managing our money. And if we make mistakes, we feel them. So that takes a little bit more discipline, a little bit more awareness. But here's the kicker, and this is why I think it's so hard to manage money, because the final step is the most challenging, and that's the whole critical thinking and decision making. And I'll give you an example, okay? Sometimes I overeat. I know I shouldn't overeat. I know what a healthy meal looks like. I know what an unhealthy meal looks like. I know on a Friday evening when I'm watching TV, I'm much better off eating a fruit salad or a bowl of yogurt than I am that big old bag of Doritos. But sometimes, I just want to eat that bag of Doritos. I want to feel that comfort food. I want to just enjoy and just relax. And if we think about really our whole kind of mental state, you've got two aspects of yourself. You have your rational self, and that's the side of you that makes smart decisions, that weighs information, that weighs data and determines, okay, this is a good decision to make. This is a bad decision. That's that rational brain that's in control and does the right thing at the right time. Okay. But then we also have this emotional side, kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde. Okay. And I think that's kind of an appropriate analogy considering it's almost Halloween. But the emotional side tells us, oh, geez, yeah, I know you're on a diet, but that donut sure looks good. Or, you know what? My TV is just great. I've got this wonderful TV. But when you go to Best Buy 2 days before the Super Bowl and you see all these big flat screens on TV on sale and you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I need a new TV. That's that emotional side of our brain at work. And really, if you think of our lives, it's almost like this constant struggle, this tug of war between the rational side, which makes the right decision, and that emotional side that's pulling on us to make that not so right decision.
We're great at justifying things, aren't we? Let's see.
The emotional side tends to win. And that's why managing money can be so difficult, because we might know the right thing to do. We might know how to manage a bank account. We might know how much we can afford to spend this weekend or not afford, or how much we can afford to spend on Christmas presents. But when we're in that situation and that emotional brain is able to take over, 9 times out of 10, it's going to pull us in that wrong direction. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is to really figure out how we can control our situation, how we can set things up and set our lives up so we're less prompted or we're less inclined to be nudged by that emotional brain. So really think about some of those risk factors. And again, one of the secrets is, carrying cash, because it's a more internal way to make transactions for those smaller purchases. Things like that can make a big difference in terms of, pitting that emotional side against the rational side and making sure that rational side comes up on top more often than not.
One of the things that we used to teach our kids was that if you want something, write it down and think about it for 24 hours and we'll come back to the store. If it's still there, you can, if you still want it, you can buy it. I find myself doing that less as I get older, though. I tend to be a little bit more impulsive, and maybe it's because I don't have to set a good example for my kids anymore. They're not around,
Yeah. And, well, what you're referring to are commitment devices, right? Those are commitment devices, and anything we can do to kind of put a barrier between ourselves and our money, or a barrier between ourselves and our spending. That's the whole idea behind like a 401k plan, right? Like technically you can access that money, you can pull it out, but to do so, you have to incur fees. You have to go on and request a distribution. There's there's steps involved, and just those steps that block us from doing that are enough many times to keep us from tapping into those retirement funds. Commitment device, so they work. So figure out a commitment device. Could be as simple as writing it down, like you said, Russ, or, using cash as opposed to plastic, or just keeping those Doritos locked away.
This is why we can't have ice cream in my house, because I just eat it all. I love the ice cream. Yeah. Doritos, that's my wife's weakness.
They say Doritos are like the most addictive food ever created. Like they've done some study. There's like 8 elements to make a food like hyper addictive, and Doritos checks all those boxes.
Yeah. Well,
they're a drug.
Science. It's science. You can't argue with science, right? Hey, we're going to take a real quick break. I've got a little thing we're going to show here, and then we're going to come right back. And I know you got a few more slides. We're going to jump back into those.
Okay.
All right. Be right back. Shawn, as we jump back into your slides and let you talk a little bit more, I know that we're ready to talk about wealth transfer. Why is this such a big deal? And what we normally see in the news, and this is just from my perspective, is I think there was a term called trust fund babies. We would see people like, I guess Paris Hilton is a prime example of somebody who could really spend grandpa's money. She was really good at it. I guess she still is. I don't know. But we see people and we say, well, she didn't do anything. Why is it important for us to be able to transfer wealth to future generations? And I don't know, talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, I think as Native people for so long, we've struggled financially, and it's really just been about kind of keeping our heads above water. And fortunately, over the last few generations, many more Native families and individuals are in a position now where we can really build wealth, whether it's gaming revenue, per capita income, miners trust payments, whether it's smart career choices. Out west where I'm from, you have a lot of Native people that are sitting on oil land, and they've got royalties coming in through Department of Interior and things like that. And we're finally in this position where we can really think about building wealth. And I always ask people sometimes, well, what's the difference between being rich and being wealthy? And the way it was described to me, being rich means you can afford to live in a nice, comfortable house and you can drive a fancy car. Being wealthy means you've got so much money that your grandchildren can't afford to live in a really nice, comfortable home and drive a fancy car. That's taking it to that next level. And unfortunately, though, it's really tough. It's really tough. And Paris Hilton's a good example, because I'm going to share a quote, and it goes like this: rich men's sons are seldom rich men's fathers.
Ooh.
Okay. Ooh. Or I could just as easily say rich women's daughters are seldom rich women's mothers. So what do I mean by that? I mean that what happens in many cases, even with very wealthy families, is that for whatever reason, that next generation tends to mismanage that wealth that was passed down to them from the previous generation. And some people will say, oh, well, they're not invested in it. They didn't work hard to make that money. Like, we hear these stories about these men like the Vanderbilts and John Rockefeller, who create these big fortunes, and then the next generation just doesn't appreciate it. Maybe they didn't work as hard to create that money. I don't really know that that's necessarily what's going on, but but it creates challenges. And the flip side of that is if you look at families that live in poverty, it usually takes a couple of generations to get out of poverty, whether that be getting an education or building a business. So it takes about 2 generations to get out of poverty, and it can also take about 2 generations to squander a fortune. And if you look at the pictures here on this slide, it shows how in many cases a nest egg that's created in one person's lifetime is reduced by half to that next generation. And then by the time the grandchildren get around, it's about 10% of what that original wealth amount was.
Wow.
Just 2 generations ago. So I think this is something sadly, I don't have the answer. If I had the answer to how we could secure wealth for multi-generations, holy cow, I'd put Dave Ramsey out of business, I think.
Well, this reminds me of, when you were talking about some of the Department of Interior royalties that some tribal members enjoy. Years ago, I heard a Saudi sheikh. He said, "My great-grandfather rode a camel. I drive a Bentley. My great-grandchildren will ride a camel." And he was acknowledging the fact that those resources are not going to last forever, and that they needed a different way to kind of maintain that wealth. And I like the distinction you made between wealth and riches. Riches is more of a temporary, tangible thing, but the wealth can be and should be passed on to those future generations. But it's really surprising when you say that only 10% make it down to the grandchildren.
Yeah, it's tough. And, if you look at those Forbes lists every year of the richest people in America, you don't see Vanderbilt's on that list.
No.
You don't see JP Morgan's relatives on that. It's these new families that have come along. A lot of these tech people in the last 20 years, most of these really, really fabulously wealthy people, it's tech-based wealth that they've created. And it's some of it's, within the last 10, 15, 20 years. So, but you wonder, okay, yeah, Mark Zuckerberg's one of the richest people in the world. What kind of financial situation will his grandchildren be in? His great-grandchildren. So, and I think in Indian country, this is something, and I understand, for a lot of folks, we might, this might still be a few years away. And especially now with the setback that we're feeling economically. But I think a lot of folks are in a position now where they can really start thinking about building that nest egg. And it all starts with being organized and saving. And it's amazing how really quickly a person can build wealth and save money when they really put their mind to it.
So are you saying they need to create a financial plan?
Absolutely. Yeah. Make a financial plan. That's the next step. Even with regard to this income shock that a lot of folks are dealing with right now, make that plan. And it doesn't have to be fancy. When people hear financial plan, they think, oh my gosh, high-priced financial advisors and fancy spreadsheets and charts and graphs. And no, sometimes it's just as simple as writing a paragraph about what you plan to do with your money. Here's a simple pie chart. Somebody has $10,000, how they're going to distribute it. So think about this upcoming per capita payment over $4,000. What are you going to do with that money? And make that plan before you get that payment. How much do you want to spend on those holiday gifts? If you've got some bills that need to be paid off, what percentage can you put into savings? If you do that now, before that money arrives in about a month, you'll be a whole lot better off. And it's interesting because a few years ago, I had the privilege of doing a survey with Eastern Band members. And we did a survey of folks that of younger people who'd received minors trust payments. And we went back, we surveyed some people who were part of that very first group of minors trust recipients who'd gotten less than $1,000. And this was, I believe, in about 2012, 2013. So we surveyed some young people who were getting, the large, big money amounts that people have become so accustomed to in recent years, and every amount in between. Some people had gotten 20,000, some people had gotten 40,000. And what we learned is that, unfortunately, the majority of minors trust recipients, before they got their payment, hadn't taken time to make a financial plan. Something as simple as this, writing a paragraph or making a pie chart. They hadn't done that. I believe less than 25% of recipients that we surveyed actually sat down ahead of time and made a plan. But what's so amazing is that for those that did make a plan, we learned that they managed their money a lot better and they spent it. It took a lot longer for them to spend it. and the money lasted a lot longer simply than those who didn't make the plan. So
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. It's all about writing things down. And, we might have goals, we might have plans and dreams, but once you formalize it, it was something like this, like a chart, or you write it down on a piece of paper, now you own it and you're invested in it. So make a plan.
Yeah. And you can hold yourself accountable too. I like that. I love that. Yeah. So what are you going to do with that money when it comes in? I love what he's telling us. So you've got an amount, you know the amount, write that down and break it down into what you want to do. So important to have those goals. It's kind of like if you, we've been talking about food. I think there's a common theme running through this, Shawn, is that we're both hungry, but I am not allowed to go to the grocery store without a list, because I come home with a carload of Oreos and some ice cream, and we throw the Doritos in there, but I have to stick to the list or the money doesn't get spent the right way.
And I can't go to the grocery store when I'm hungry.
Oh no.
If I walk in a grocery store on an empty stomach, I'll buy everything off the shelves. Yeah, it's these commitment devices. It really does make a difference. It really does. And sometimes I think people think there's like this magical formula to how to get ahead financially. And you watch some of these gurus on television, or you read my Dr. Per Cap columns. And one thing I really try and stress is that there really are not simple, easy answers. Some of this stuff, it's about making sacrifices. It's about tightening that belt. It's about setting those priorities. But once you really kind of create a habit and you get into it, you find that you're not as tempted as much. And the longer you stay on that right track financially, the more you have invested emotionally, it's just that much harder. I think of the times in my life when I've gone on a diet. It's really easy to break a diet if you've only been on a diet for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But if you're able to stick with that diet for 3 months or 4 months, boy, you start really thinking of how much time and how much effort you've put into that diet. And you're a lot less likely to break that diet, because you realize how hard it was to get to where you've gotten. So I think money is very similar. Once you've got those goals and you're really working towards those goals and you're invested in them and you've got some time that you put into it, you're going to be a lot more inclined to stick with it. And it really is baby steps. And I tell people sometimes, that, especially folks that are really struggling financially and they just have really had a hard time kind of getting that foothold, I'll just, for the first day, just track your expenses. Track those expenses and just kind of see where you are, and we'll go from there. Because sometimes people, I think, feel really overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, I just don't have enough money. And now you're telling me per cap's going to be less. And even if it's only $2,000 less, well, holy cow, that $2,000 difference is going to be the difference between a good Christmas for my kids and a not so good Christmas for my kids. And I just want to, make people really understand that Christmas really isn't about tons of presents under the trees. I think more than anything, your kids just love you and they want to have that time with you. And we need to think about things like that as well.
And I think COVID has created an awareness in more people that just being with family is so vitally important. And I think it's very telling that a lot of the spread of the disease comes from family spread. It comes from family gatherings, because we are so hungry to just be with our people, right? We're so hungry to be with people we love. And so let's do it. Here's the little commercial for that. Let's do it the right way, folks, so that we can continue to have them around. So we got some key takeaways here, Shawn, that we need to talk about. We've talked about getting organized, and I've got some notes here for myself. I've been taking notes, things that I need to do to make sure that I can track my money.
Yeah, so we definitely want to get organized. We talked about tracking, using an app on your phone, using a handwritten notebook, cutting those expenses. And I mentioned those flexible expenses. That's where we're going to start. Those costs that we can control. That's the electricity bill. That's the grocery bill. That's the gas bill. We can cut there first. Thinking about that cash flow. And it's all about having more income than we have expenses going out. And if that cash flow is off, it's pretty much impossible to get ahead financially. So in most cases, cutting expenses is the quickest and easiest way to get our cash flow positive. And then lastly, we really want to think about building savings. And people always ask me, well, how much should I have in savings? How much should I think about saving for retirement or things like that? And there's really no specific answer. Some people say you should save 10%. I think that's a good kind of ballpark figure. Some people say you should have, think about when you retire, you should have 20 years worth of living costs and retirement savings. Here's what I'll tell you right off the bat. If you're new to savings or you have a hard time saving money every month, I think you want to make your first goal, simply to save $400, $400. And the reason I use that figure of $400, every year they do a survey of American households. It's called the Household Financial Security Survey. And they have determined consistently that almost 50% of Americans, if faced with an emergency $400 expense, will have to either borrow or sell something of value to cover that $400 expense. So in some ways, I think that's really shocking, and that's really bad news that almost
it is spooky.
Americans,
it really is
spooky. But in other ways, I think it's something that a lot of people can kind of take some relief in and thinking, well, holy cow, I'm not alone. And you know what? If 50% of Americans will struggle with a $400 emergency expense, that tells me that when I drive through Asheville and I see people driving their fancy SUVs and I see people living in their fancy neighborhoods, I think a lot of that money is borrowed money. And there's a lot of people that we might think of as being really well off financially that probably aren't doing as well as they might, or we might think they are. So again, I think that's a good place to start. Just try and save $400, because if you can save that $400, you'll be ahead of about 50% of the American population. Once you get that $400 savings, then you can build on that. Shoot for $1,000, shoot for $1,500. Try and save 10% of every paycheck. Try and set aside 10% of those per capita payments. And again, I really stress this. You'd be surprised how quickly savings can grow when you get into that mindset of savings. But start out with a small, manageable goal, something that's easy to attain. Because if you set too high a goal for yourself, it can be too difficult. It can be overwhelming, and you'll just get discouraged. So,
yeah, and I think 400 is that's a number that everybody can see, right? That's a number we can wrap our heads around, and yeah, it's attainable, like you said. I think that's a great way to start. So I'm going to put up your information here, because I know people are going to need to get in touch with you. I want us to talk just in the last few minutes we have together about this program that we are working on, both you and Sequoyah Fund in conjunction, to try to help people through any kind of difficulty that they're having with income disruption, just a loss of income, maybe a loss of a job, maybe their business is closed, maybe they've been laid off, like you said, or furloughed. Maybe they've got some illness in the family. They're having to take an extended leave of absence or something like that. Tell us what people can expect as we move through the next couple of months.
Okay, so yeah, I'm really excited. I'm going to be continuing to work with you at Sequoyah Fund. We're going to do more of these live stream presentations. We're going to create some videos. We're going to create some other types of learning opportunities. But it's going to be fun. They're going to be engaging types of informative programs that are going to be designed specifically for EBCI community members. We're going to talk about per capita. We're going to learn a little bit more about the nature of per capita, learn a little bit more about the investments that make up per capita. We're going to have representatives from tribal government. They're going to share a little bit more information about how per cap is structured, how the miners trust is structured. So we're going to learn a little bit more about investments and how, as an EBCI member, you have a vested interest in that per capita fund and in the revenue of the casino. We're going to talk more about managing expenses, using budgets. I'm going to share more information, more ideas, more tips, more tools for how to create budgets, how to stay in line with budgets, talking about things like commitment devices and that whole emotional and rational brain and that constant tug of war. We call that behavioral economics, and it's a growing field of research with regard to how people manage money and how we think about money. Things like spending cash versus paying with a credit card or a debit card, things like that really make a difference. And more and more, we're learning that behavioral economics play a huge role in how we manage money. So we're going to explore some of those topics as well. We're going to learn more about credit and the risks of borrowing in a situation like this, where we're facing kind of a challenging economic time. So we're going to really focus on this whole idea of income disruption and financial shock, and provide whatever tools and programs we can to make the most impact in the lives of EBCI citizens and their families.
Thank you for that overview. A lot of people know Sequoyah Fund as a lending organization. We do lend money, but especially right now, we want to help improve people's financial condition, no matter how that happens, whether it's borrowing money to keep their business afloat, or to pay employees, or just to help you with your personal finances. It's really important that we do this. It's important that we engage in this as a community. It's important that we have somebody with the expertise of our own Dr. Per-Cap. And yeah, we're so thankful to have you on board for this project, folks. You need to be looking for more information on this through our social media channels. Please go ahead and like us on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, you can follow us there. You'll get updates there. And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit the bell so that you're notified anytime we put up new content. If there's new content that is relevant to you, we certainly want to give you access to it. And as with all live streams, this is going to be around forever. And so share it with people. Let other people in your family, let other people in your circle of friends know about this. Share this information. It's vitally important that we take care of the money we have. And like an old friend of mine once said, the true secret to getting wealthy, to building wealth, is to spend less than you make. And I think you've done a great job telling us how to go about doing that. You've given us some tools that we can use, very tangible tools that we can get started with today. And Shawn, Dr. Per-Cap, I want to thank you for being on this episode of Sequoyah Fund Live.
Thank you so much, Russ. And again, really looking forward to diving deeper into this whole project and working again with EBCI community members, family people, and just being involved.
Well, we've got an exciting ride for the next couple of months. So folks, check in with us. If you want to go to our website and sign up for our email list, go to the bottom of the front page there. You can sign up for our email list. We're going to send you emails when any new content comes available, any new program related information is available that you want to take advantage of to share with your family and friends as well. With that, I'm going to say thank you for giving us your lunch hour. Thank you for being with us and giving us all this great information, Shawn. And for those of you who've joined us, thank you so much. Now go do something with this information. That's the important thing, right?
And happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. All right. Trick or treating, everybody. Don't come to the emergency house. I'll tell you, get off my lawn. All right. Everybody have a great day.